Are you sure?
Here's the 30-second lesson on what legends know. Never ask a bride why she's getting married. Don't wear a skirt on a windy day. Deodorant is not a shower. Don't sniff chili flakes. And don't forget, saving is not investing. Legends don't just save, they invest in mutual funds. Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme-related documents carefully.
Just a few days ahead of the plenary of the Communist Party of China, the Pew Research Center has released a very interesting and very significant research finding, a sizable report, 67 pages. My apologies for printing this. I still tend to be a bit old-fashioned. I also promise you that I will use the other side as well in the course of time. So this is a report written by Laura Silver, Christian Huang, Laura Clancy, and Andrew Prozorovsky. So that helps us get the highlights from the report. And since we're talking about an international issue today, I will also take a few minutes of your time towards the conclusion to talk about France. Because the French have had this very unusual election. I missed my slot, in a manner of speaking, to talk about that election because that coincided, the results coincided with the our Prime Minister going to Moscow. And that was, at that point, a much more important story for us. And I know that a lot of you watched those episodes of Cut the Clutter. So I missed out on the French election, yet it's so interesting. The whole phenomenon has been so interesting that I can't help but steal a few minutes of your time towards the conclusion of this episode. I'm also inspired by something, or maybe provoked by something, that I saw Emmanuel Macron, the president of France, say to the press. He said, for example, he's played a very complex game. And people are asking him questions. What does it mean? This left, right, etc., etc. And he said something very interesting. Only a French leader could have said it. He said, my thoughts are too complex for journalists. So because he spoke that line, I thought at least in conclusion, I should also talk about the French election a little bit also. So please do stay with me. Now, this is a study of 35 significant countries in the world. 35 generally divided between 17 high-income countries, 18 middle-income countries. Which countries are these? You can see this map of the world according to Pew with one change. The change is wherever India appears in Pew maps, we've taken the liberty of making it correct in terms of the map of India as we in India see the map of India. We cannot publish someone else's perception of the map of India. That qualification apart, we are grateful to Pew for graphics that we are borrowing from them. This map shows you the 35 countries where this research was held. And then the countries are color-coded in terms of high income and middle income. So 18 plus 17, 35 countries. What these show is, these have some very interesting findings. And I will take you through these. These findings are not necessarily all bad for China. Yes, these findings show that a majority of people across the world in these 35 countries are still by and large skeptical of China. They're skeptical of China. Also, in fact, another connected survey tells us that even now, globally, in these countries, the view of America is more positive than that on China. So the view on America is positive among 52%, China is 35%. Now there also, China gets a lot of favorable reporting from middle-income countries, particularly in Africa, what is called as Global South, right? Keep India out of it. It obviously doesn't get very positive ratings in India, but also in many of the Southeast Asian countries, Thailand, for example, Singapore. Those are Malaysia. Those are surprises, but not quite surprises. And that is what shores up China's number, so it gets up to 35. But 52% people still view America more positively than China. The middle-income countries, by and large, are less negative on China than the higher-income countries. In fact, that is where India is an outlier. In India, more people are negative on China than generally in middle-income countries in the same cohort. This is a survey of a sample of 44,166 people across 35 countries conducted between Jan 5 to May 21 this year. So it's very, very recent. Among these countries, of 13 countries, trend data is available. So we know how these attitudes have been shifting over time. 10 of the 13 in 10 of the 13 in the 10 of the 13 countries, a majority believes that China now has a substantially greater impact on their economy than 5 years ago. That's very interesting. Of the 17 middle income countries, 47% have a positive view on China, 29% are negative. Of the 18 high income countries, 57 have a negative view of China, 57%, 28% have positive. Now, there are a couple of the interesting highlights of this survey. As I told you, this is 67 pages, lots of graphics. If I started going over all of that, it will take a couple of hours. But in the spirit of cut the clutter, I take out some highlights. You see, for example, this one graphic. This one graphic tells you how the nations of the Asia Pacific region, how concerned the countries of the Asia Pacific region are about China's border disputes, border and territorial disputes. Now, this is a very key graphic because this affects also negatively, from China's point of view, many of the countries where China may otherwise not be so popular, because everybody seems to be concerned about China's territorial demands and China's territorial disputes. So see this graphic, please. The element on the left, extreme left of the graphic, is people who say they are not concerned. So the question is, how concerned are you about China's territorial disputes? So a majority in Asia Pacific countries surveyed are concerned about China's territorial disputes. The countries where people are least concerned of this group of 10 this group of 10 countries, the least concerned are Thailand. So 61% are not concerned. In fact, for Thailand, only about 11% will be very concerned. 27% will be somewhat concerned. See, on the other hand, the Philippines. In the Philippines, 91% are concerned. 91% are concerned. In Thailand, 38% are concerned, 27 plus 11. In the Philippines, 91% are concerned. In South Korea, 87% are concerned. Japan, 86%. Australia, 82%. Even Malaysia, which is otherwise quite positive on China, 74%. India, 69%. In fact, if anything, China gets a little less worse rating in India than in the other Quad countries, that is Japan and Australia. And even in Singapore, which is otherwise quite friendly with China, quite positive on China, especially on the economy, 64% are concerned. Sri Lanka 49%, Bangladesh 47%. So this is one issue, China's territorial disputes, where even countries of Asia Pacific, many of which are otherwise positive on China, are really concerned about China. So that is something that China needs to take notice of. The second important graphic is what people in these 35 countries think of Xi. Once again, it goes with the trend in the higher income countries. Canada, US, even in Hungary, right? Otherwise, Viktor Orban is quite friendly with China. Hungary, Italy, UK, Spain, Netherlands, Germany, France, the worst. The larger question is, how much confidence do you have in Xi Jinping? The first answer is not too much or none at all. In France, it's 81%. In Sweden, it's 83%. In the US, 79%. In Canada, it's 74%. But once again, when you come towards the middle income countries, China's or Xi Jinping's rankings improve. So that's another very interesting finding. If you see the overall percentage, the overall ranking, 35 country median, 62% have not too much or no confidence at all in Xi Jinping. 24% have a great deal or a fair amount of confidence. India is somewhat of a surprise because the negative rating for Xi Jinping in India is just 43%. So 43% say negative. This is about a half of Sweden or France, or just a little over a half of the US, which is a bit surprising given how much trouble Xi Jinping is giving to India, has been giving to India for 10 years now. People who have confidence, a great deal of confidence or a fair amount of confidence in Xi Jinping is 19%. Who are these 19%? I'd like to meet them, right? Look them in the eye and ask them, hello, What is it that you find so reassuring about Xi Jinping that none of us knew about? 38% Indians, however, either say they don't know or they refused. Are they afraid of Xi Jinping prying on their phones through some Pegasus or something? I don't know. But this is a very intriguing finding for India. Overall, however, 35 country median, 62% are negative on Xi Jinping, 24% are positive. Now, see this graphic, again a very important one, how people in high and middle income countries view Joe Biden and Xi Jinping. Again, that high income, middle income dichotomy or difference is clear. If you see the 17 country median for high income countries, 42% view Biden more positively. And only 17% view Xi Jinping more positively. But if you come to middle income countries, 44% view Biden positively, so that ranking remains. But 45% view Xi Jinping more positively. So notionally, if Xi Jinping and Joe Biden were to contest an election in these 17 countries, chances are that by a very narrow margin, Xi Jinping may win. It will not happen because these middle-income countries also include India, where 44% are positive on Biden and only 19%, again I want to repeat this 19% are positive on Xi Jinping. But it's just the numbers of India which will save the world from Xi Jinping becoming the leader of the world, right? At the same time, this is a very interesting finding. Then we look at American comparison. Again, a very interesting graphic because for America, trendline data is available from 2005 to 2024. So you see how America's negative view on China has been rising and how America's positive view on China has been declining. It's a scissors graphic. It intersects somewhere in the middle. And where does it intersect? When you see this graphic, you can see that it more or less intersects the period or the moment when Xi Jinping takes over as China's leader. For example, when did America have the most favorable view of China? It was 52% in 2012. In 2012, it was 52%. Now it has gone up to 81%. In fact, in the last survey, it was 83%. So 81, 83%. It's gone that much worse. Now, if you see this graphic, blue is a negative view. That negative view is at its lowest in about 2010, 11, 12, 13, that period. It goes in the 37%, 36% range. It's negative, but at that level. And then it starts to rise. When does it start to rise? It starts to rise in 2014. What happened in 2014? That's when Xi Jinping took over. The light green line is the line of popularity. These are people, this is the percentage of people who have a favorable view of China. When was it at its peak? It was at its peak at 52%, say in about 2012, 2013. And then it begins to decline. When does it decline? The decline starts in 2014 when Xi Jinping takes over. And that's where the two graphics intersect between 2013 and 2014. And then the blue line, the negative line goes up. So the negative line goes from a minimum of 29% in 2006 to 81% now. That is how unpopular China has become in the US. However, there is some other data there in which I will not go because it will be too much detail. That shows that among the older people in America and in fact in the rest of the world, China is a lot more unpopular than among the younger people. Now that is something that needs a deeper analysis. Maybe that is something on which we'll host some opinion in the course of time. Now as this unpopularity or unfavorable view has gone up like this, see what's happened to the favorable view. The favorable view has accordingly come down. It has come down at its peak. It was at about 52% in say 2013. It has now come down to 16%. So unfavorable gone up from 29% to 81%. Favorable gone down from 52%. It was also 52% in 2006 when the unfavorable view was also the lowest, right? That has gone to 16%. That's the big difference on China in America. But I told you the nuance that there is a distinction between older people and younger people. There is also an ideological distinction because there is other data. We'll show that graphic to you. You can see that graphic on your screen. And in any case, I will share a link to the entire report for you. You can see all of this. At leisure, this graphic tells you that people of the Republican persuasion or conservative persuasion tend to be much more anti-China, skeptical of China than those of the democratic or liberal persuasion. So younger people are less skeptical of China, older people are more. The liberal people are less skeptical of China, conservative people more. That is also a trend that is seen in the rest of the world. In fact, one curious thing I found is in this survey that they say how they pose the ideology question to their respondents. Are you from the left, right, extreme conservative? So for different countries or different sets of countries, they posited that question differently. For India, they didn't ask that question at all. So in India, we don't have that one subset of this analysis, whether the liberals are skeptical, more skeptical of China or less, or the conservatives, for the simple reason that Pew hasn't done it. The US data, in fact, has other curious findings. How many people see the Chinese as enemies? So see this graphic also. All these graphics are from Pew. Among Republicans, 59% see China as enemy. Conservatives, 69% see China as enemy. Democrats, only 30%. But this is enemies. It doesn't mean that the rest of the Democrats are friendly to China or don't see China as a threat. But enemy is raising threat perception to a very high level, to a much higher level. But middle income countries, see the graphic again on the economy. Most middle income countries think that China is good for their economy. Thailand, Kenya, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Nigeria, Philippines, South Africa, Ghana, even in India, 49% think that China is good for their economy. So the median rating for middle income countries for China on whether China is good for their economy or not is 72%. In fact, interestingly, there's a question there: are Chinese projects and companies good for the environment? Generally, the rating for China, the median is good. In India, however, only 43% say it's good for their companies are good for the environment. Now, what is China's role in global stability? That was a question asked. Does China exercise? First of all, everybody agrees that China exercises great influence over today's world. Also, that China exercises great influence on each country's economy. All data is available. We'll run some of those graphics for you. You can see those graphics as I talk. But in Asia Pacific, views on China's role on peace and stability globally. Is China good for global peace and stability? Again, it's varied in Asia Pacific region. Thailand, 80% think China is good for global stability and security. In Malaysia, 76% applaud China. Singapore, 73%. Sri Lanka, 72%. Philippines, 57%. But then you see Japan, only 29%. India, thereabouts, 26%. So the Quad spirit is coming in there. South Korea, 26%. They also have issues with China. And Australia, 22%. So see the Quad spirit. Australia, 22%. India, 26%. Japan, 29%. Only that percentage of people in these countries, Quad countries, think that China has a positive impact on global stability and peace. So as Mr. Xi Jinping goes into his plenary now of his party, he will have these inputs. I mean, these are sobering that every country now acknowledges China's power. Every country, rich or poor, rich or not so rich, middle income, acknowledges that China is critical to their economies, or China has a very big influence on their economies. Not many think China has a positive impact on global stability. Many in the region, China's neighborhood, that is the Asia Pacific region, many countries in this region think that China's influence on global stability is negative, and almost every country in the Asia Pacific region is concerned about China's territorial disputes. With many of these countries, these disputes are in the seas. they have maritime disputes, but with a country like India, it's a land border dispute. So these are issues that worry people about China. Once again, if you see the big country, the superpower, China is a deputy superpower, the superpower, there, the negativity on China is now rising. It's increasing. It's gone to the 80% plus level, which almost amounts to a unanimity. And that's also a very significant finding. So it's not as if Xi Jinping is getting any popular in the world. In fact, if anything, on balance, he's getting less popular in the rest of the world, particularly in the democratic world. But does he care? He doesn't care because he does not have to fight any elections. He can, on the other hand, celebrate the fact that under him, the power of China is being acknowledged to be much greater globally than ever since Deng Xiaoping started the reform process there. And now that said, I'll bring you back to France because as I said earlier on, I warned you that I will take a few minutes talking about France. We know the elections there. This was the election to national parliament. We also know that France has this peculiar system whereby the elected government, the prime minister has a set of powers, the president has another set of powers. In fact, if you see how France runs, it's a bit like you can say that all of France runs with Article 370 on itself, or I would go a step further. This is 370 plus. All of France runs on the basis of what is it that the Akalis demanded in the Anandpur Sahib resolution, right? Why do I say that? Because Anandpur Sahib resolution said that the center shall control foreign affairs, defense, currency, right? And national security communication. All the rest will be left to the states. And in that case, the state they were more concerned about was Punjab. Now that applies to all of France in the sense that in this peculiar system, the elected government governs the country, all economic policy, immigration policy, labor laws, even law and order is with them. Whereas foreign affairs, European affairs, and defense, those are with the president, and the president is directly elected. So this election doesn't directly affect the president. His term lasts till 2027. His concern was that in this election, if the right wing wins, Marine Le Pen's party wins, because her party had beaten his party quite thoroughly in the European elections, European Parliament elections, and looked like polls were showing that they were far ahead of the others. And all the votes will get divided and they will come to power. And that would have become a problem because hard right would have destabilized France from his point of view because he's built a politics which is centrist, a little bit to the right of center. He saw hard right as a much bigger threat than the left. So what did they do? They also have this other system of other complexity of two-round elections. So in the first round, you see who gets 50% vote. If you get 50% vote of the votes cast, provided that it adds up to 25% of the entire voter base, then you go through, you don't have to do a second round, but it almost never happens. So everybody goes into a second round. So the runners up or people who secure a minimum number of votes in the first round go to a runoff round, all the others then drop out. In the runoff round, because it looked like the hard right will win, Macron's party, which is the ensemble party, and also the combined group of the left parties, 4 left parties called NPF, New Popular Front. So New Popular Front and Ensemble, they decided on an alliance, an unspoken alliance. And how did that alliance work? They did not fight together. They just decided to withdraw candidates from certain constituencies. So if there was a bunch of constituencies where Macron's party thought the left will win, they withdrew their candidates from there. If there were constituencies where the left thought that Macron's party had a better chance of winning, they withdrew their candidates. So the anti-hard right vote will not get divided, and see the result of that. In a 588 member house, the National Rally, which is the hard right party, which had come first in the first round, finished number 3 with 142 seats, way below the majority mark, whereas the Left Alliance got 181 seats, and not far behind, Macron's party got 161 seats. So two adversaries got together to keep the third one out. So Macron therefore decided to align with the hard left to keep the hard right out. In his view, he chose the lesser evil. In this process, his party also did not get wiped out. His party has lost power. His prime minister has resigned. Now coalition talks will go on. Maybe there'll be 6 months of mess. We don't know. But the fact is that in the process, Macron has delivered quite a death blow to the hard right in France. And they will have a tough time recovering from it because the next election will be 5 years later. And that is the complex game that Macron played. And that is the complex game that Macron played because in the process, because he advanced this election, this is a midterm election, in the process, he's lost his own government in parliament. Maybe now his party will be also involved in the coalition as it comes up. We don't know. But the fact is he's lost that power in his parliament. The new prime minister will not be listening to him all the time as the last one did. So that die is cast. However, this is a risk that he thought was worth taking, and he would think that he has mostly achieved what he wanted, which is finishing the threat of the hard right to France for a very, very long time. That is the reason when people ask, why have you done such a thing? Why did you advance this election? Why did you risk losing your parliament, right? Why did you risk seeing hard right take government in your country and the threat of cohabitation with them? Why did you then align with your own critics in the left to keep the hard right out? That is what earns Macron the right to say, and the right to a big smile, to say it with a big smile, that my thoughts are too complex for journalists, because he's played this really complex game and the outcome is all before us.